Laying ceramic tiles in a 10 by 12 kitchen was a demanding task, especially with each tile measuring just 4 by 4 inches. Oscar Hogarth methodically applied adhesive to each piece, ensuring it aligned perfectly with the one before it. He felt a quiet pride in his precision, knowing that even the smallest mistake could throw off the entire project. At Rivers Renovation and Remodeling, where nothing less than perfection was acceptable, Oscar prided himself on maintaining those standards. As he neared the end of one row, his wife Ginger called. Answering the call, Oscar braced himself. Ginger's warm, cheerful tone from years ago had long vanished, replaced by curt, impatient inquiries. Without a greeting, she got straight to the point. "How much longer are you going to be?" Oscar guessed it would take about 3 more hours to finish at Braden's kitchen. Before he could elaborate, Ginger hung up abruptly, leaving him with a familiar feeling of pressure and frustration. Despite the tension, he forced himself to focus on precision, unwilling to compromise the quality of his work. As he worked, Oscar's mind wandered back through his decades-long relationship with Ginger. They had first crossed paths during his early days at Rivers Renovation and Remodeling. Ginger had entered the office, apologizing profusely to her father, Benjamin Oakman, for her poor grades at Peacock High School. Oscar, then just 21, had briefly taken in her stout figure and long, unruly hair before quickly returning to his tools. He wasn't one to get involved in drama, especially since Benjamin made it clear that Ginger was off-limits. "She's my daughter," Benjamin warned sharply. Oscar had nodded, keeping his thoughts to himself. But Ginger wasn't deterred by her father's protective stance. She began to make her presence known, smiling at Oscar, flirting at every opportunity. Her advances annoyed him more than anything. At 17, Ginger was chubby, plagued by acne, and far too immature for Oscar's liking. One day, as Oscar wrestled with a bag of cement, Ginger sauntered over, trying to catch his attention. "I turn 18 on Saturday," she said, leaning forward in a way she thought was enticing. "Good for you," Oscar replied dryly, not even glancing up. When she pressed him for a birthday gift, Oscar brushed her off with a sarcastic, "Close your eyes. What do you see? Nothing? That's your gift." Despite Oscar's indifference, Ginger's mother, Evelyn Oakman, seemed determined to push them together. She insisted Benjamin invite Oscar to Ginger's 18th birthday party, and later even pressured Oscar to escort Ginger to prom. Out of obligation, Oscar complied, though he cringed at her tight, sleeveless dress. He went through the motions, posing for photos, dancing awkwardly, and giving her a reluctant goodnight kiss. A few days later, Benjamin scolded Oscar for ignoring Ginger afterward, claiming he had broken her heart. Reluctantly, Oscar asked her out again. By their 5th date, Ginger had given him her virginity, and 5 months after their rushed wedding, their daughter Wendy was born. The years that followed were a whirlwind of sacrifices for Oscar. He spent the next decade enduring the most grueling assignments at Rivers Renovation, suspecting Benjamin deliberately gave him the toughest jobs. For the first 16 years of their marriage, Ginger made an effort to be a supportive wife. She cooked his favorite meals, stayed quiet during his cherished Denver Broncos games, and even tried to lose weight, though with little success. Her skin eventually cleared up, but the scars remained. Things changed when Wendy started school, and Ginger got a job at the local library. Although the pay was modest, the comprehensive health benefits were a welcome addition. Then, after their 16th wedding anniversary, Ginger's cousin Ella moved to town, bringing her brash and abrasive personality with her. Under Ella's influence, Ginger became more confrontational, neglecting her responsibilities at home and complaining incessantly. What began as occasional lapses soon turned into a nightly routine of Ginger, Ella, and her husband Dexter finding ways to spend their evenings away from the Hogarth household. Oscar took on the cooking and cleaning without complaint, but the growing strain was undeniable. Even Wendy, who learned to do chores and mend her school uniforms, directed her resentment at Oscar rather than blaming her mother. That day, Oscar completed Braden's kitchen precisely 3 hours after Ginger's call, despite the stiffness in his back reminding him of his age. Gathering his tools, he reflected on how much had changed. When he called Benjamin to report the finished job, he could hear the old man's gruff, slurred speech, a result of the massive stroke that had nearly killed him. Evelyn's double mastectomy and grueling cancer treatments had left her drained, yet she still shouldered the burden of caring for her husband until her death. Now, Benjamin relied heavily on his sons for help, with Oscar stepping in when needed. Ginger, once her mother's closest companion during her illness, had gradually distanced herself from her family. When Oscar returned home that evening, he was greeted by the scent of pork chops, mashed potatoes, and green beans, his favorite meal. It was a rare indulgence, as Ginger had put the family on a heart-healthy diet after Benjamin's stroke. Despite losing 40 pounds, she was still overweight, and her bland cooking was a running joke in the family. Oscar often teased Wendy, accusing her of choosing a college far away just to escape her mother's cooking, a claim she didn't deny. That night, as Ginger cooked, Oscar tried to lean in for a kiss, but she waved him off irritably, pinching her nose in disgust. Oscar tossed his clothes into the hamper and stepped into the shower, letting the water wash away the sweat and exhaustion clinging to him. The physical demands of the job had been grueling when he was 21. Now, at 45, they were downright punishing. The wear and tear on his body were undeniable, but Spencer, Lucas, and Adrian seemed oblivious to his struggles. They consistently argued that hiring extra help wasn't an option, citing the mountain of medical bills piling up from Ben's ongoing rehabilitation. After drying off, Oscar caught a blurred glimpse of his toned reflection in the fogged-up mirror but chose to ignore it. Dressed in a t-shirt and shorts, he made his way downstairs just as Ginger placed a slice of dessert on his plate. "Hot apple pie," she announced, setting a frosted mug of beer in front of him with a deliberate flourish. Oscar's stomach churned at the sight of the beer. The memory of the last time Ginger had served him a frosted mug came rushing back, an unpleasant flashback to her 37th birthday, months before their 17th anniversary. That night, with Wendy out with friends, Ginger had poured Oscar a beer and interrupted his enjoyment with a pointed conversation. "There's something I need to talk to you about," she had said, stalling with vague small talk until Oscar, nearly finished with his drink, urged her to get to the point. What followed had left him stunned. Ginger confessed that Ella and Dexter had an open marriage and then asked Oscar if he'd ever considered being unfaithful. "Of course, I've thought about it," Oscar had replied honestly, trying to keep his tone even. "I'm a man. I notice things, like that girl Shelley at the gas station." Ginger had laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Shelley? As if you'd ever stand a chance." "But I'm married," Oscar added firmly. "It doesn't matter what crosses my mind. It ends there. Did you think I'd actually act on it? Don't you think you could do something without consequences?" she pressed, her voice taking on an unsettling tone. "I can't," Oscar had said, his voice firm. "We made vows, serious vows, before our family and friends. I take them seriously." Ginger had then suggested renewing their vows, but Oscar shut her down. "The ones we made are enough. Ella and Dexter can live however they want, but that's not who we are, and it never will be." Despite his unwavering stance, Ginger brought up the idea of an open marriage twice more over the next few weeks. Her persistence only deepened Oscar's frustration. The third time she broached the subject, Oscar lost his temper. "If you think this is how I should prove my love for you, maybe I don't love you as much as I thought," he snapped. When she raised the idea a fourth time, Oscar made good on his threat to escalate. He picked up the phone and called Benjamin Oakman directly. "Hello, Ben," Oscar said, his voice calm but purposeful. Ginger's face drained of color as she realized what was happening. Her panic grew when Oscar asked for Evelyn. "Ginger has something to share with you," Oscar said coldly, handing the phone to his wife. "Go ahead. Tell your dad what Ella told you." Ginger tried to squirm out of the situation, but Oscar wouldn't let her off the hook. Cornered, she stumbled through an incoherent explanation before ending the call in a huff. "You're despicable," she hissed, glaring at him. Oscar met her anger with a warning. "Bring this up again, Ginger, and our marriage is over. I'll file for divorce." To his relief, Ginger never mentioned an open marriage again. Gradually, Ella and Dexter's visits dwindled, though Oscar wasn't sure if that was by coincidence or design. Years later, as Ginger poured Oscar another poorly foamed beer, he couldn't help but feel the unease creeping back. "I'll be 40 next Tuesday," Ginger began, a practiced casualness in her voice. "I know," Oscar replied between bites of pork chop. "During all this time, I've only ever been with one man," she continued, her tone sharper now. "Well, lucky for me," Oscar quipped, trying to defuse the tension. "And you've probably been with, 10 women by now?" she asked, an edge of accusation in her words. "Life's funny like that," Oscar replied, taking a long sip of his beer. Ignoring his response, Ginger pressed on. "I think I deserve some freedom. Ella and I are heading to Vegas next week. She found a great deal at a casino. While we're there, we might meet some guys. Just a date or two, nothing serious. It might even make me appreciate you more." Oscar kept eating, though his appetite was fading fast. "The sauce is almost right," he said, masking his anger. "You're avoiding the point," Ginger snapped. "This isn't about sauce. It's about me exploring new experiences." "So what? You think I should support you cheating on me?" Oscar shot back, his voice calm but ice-cold. "It's not cheating. It's growth," she said, crossing her arms. "You can either get on board or we can divorce. Your choice." Oscar set down his fork, pushing his plate away. "Fine. I'll start the divorce process tomorrow." Ginger's bravado faltered. "Hold on, divorces cost money. We need to think about this." "What's there to think about?" Oscar countered. "You've already decided. You're heading off to Vegas with your shady cousin, forgetting about our bills, and justifying it with some twisted notion of freedom. It's cheating, Ginger. Plain and simple. And I'm not staying married to a cheater. It's just a week," she argued weakly. "A minute, a day, a week. It doesn't matter," Oscar replied, cutting into a slice of pie. "By the way, you used that fake sugar again, didn't you?" He pushed the plate aside and stood up. "I'll see a lawyer tomorrow." Leaving Ginger speechless in the kitchen, Oscar climbed the stairs. Another long day at work awaited him, but this time he felt an odd sense of clarity. Spencer wouldn't need him until the federal savings and loan project was approved, giving him just enough time to figure out the next chapter of his life. "But Oscar, you never listen," Ginger called after me, her voice sharp and accusatory. "Sure," I shot back without turning around. "And you never heard me either. I told you exactly what would happen if you brought this up again. We're getting divorced." In our small, cluttered office, I powered up the ancient computer. It was painfully slow but functional, and it had internet access, just enough to get the job done. After a quick search for divorce attorneys, I came across Louise Stevenson's website. Her online form was straightforward, so I filled it out and hit submit. Not long after, I got a call confirming an appointment with her the next morning at 10 a.m. Later that night, Ginger came upstairs after tidying the kitchen. She undressed and slid into bed, pressing herself against me. I pulled away without hesitation. "No thanks," I said bluntly, turning to face the other direction. "Good night." By 5:30 a.m., I was awake, as usual. Even when work was slow, I stuck to my routine. Quietly, I slipped out of bed and closed the bedroom door behind me. Down in the kitchen, I brewed my morning coffee and checked my email on my phone. There was a detailed message from Louise Stevenson's office, outlining the documents I needed to bring to our meeting. I considered pouring myself a second cup, but decided against it when I heard Ginger moving around upstairs. If she wanted coffee, she could make it herself. As I scrolled through the news, Ginger's voice cut through the quiet, loud and agitated on her phone. No, I told him to give it to me," she said sharply, her words dripping with annoyance. Moments later, she appeared in the kitchen, startled to find me sitting at the table. Ending her call abruptly, she glared at me. "What are you doing here?" "Like I said, Spencer hasn't gotten the green light for the federal savings and loan project, so I'm free today," I replied, keeping my tone casual. "The grass is too wet to mow, so I thought I'd catch up on the news. Did you hear Montgomery is thinking about opening a second location? You could have saved me some coffee, she grumbled, clearly irritated. You can ask Ella to make you some, I said, rinsing my mug and placing it in the sink. Later, at Louise Stevenson's office, she reviewed our financial situation with a practiced eye. A striking brunette with sharp features, she adjusted her stylish glasses as she examined the paperwork. I see you recently refinanced at 4.9%, she remarked. That's right, I replied. Our daughter's in her final year of college, and my in-laws had massive medical bills. The deductibles were outrageous, plus there were funeral expenses, and Oakman's company has been teetering on bankruptcy. A few jobs ran over budget because Adrian botched the scheduling. Louise nodded thoughtfully. And how do you think divorcing your employer's daughter will affect your job? I plan to cut ties with the company, I said with a small smile. As for Ginger, her job at the Preston Vale Public Library shouldn't be impacted. By Friday, Spencer still hadn't received approval to begin the federal savings and loan renovations, leaving me at home working on minor repairs. When Ginger called, her tone was icy. What's this? Some kind of scam? She snapped. Oh, you got the papers, I replied calmly. What's the issue with the first-floor bathroom? You said it needed fixing, but I couldn't figure out the problem. The lock sticks, she said curtly. We'll talk when I get home. There's nothing left to discuss, Ginger, I said firmly. Talking hasn't helped, especially when you listen more to Ella than to me. I'm done talking. Fine. I see what's going on, she replied, her voice bitter. Goodbye. I don't want a divorce, Ginger added quietly, a rare hint of vulnerability in her voice. And I don't want to be married to someone unfaithful. I shot back. Anything else? No, she muttered before hanging up. Shortly after, Ben's number lit up my phone. Setting down my screwdriver, I answered. Hello. Ben's response was a mix of gruff sounds and a stream of curses. His frustration was palpable as he demanded to know what was going on between Ginger and me. It's simple, I explained, cutting through his tirade. Ella and Dexter have an open marriage, and they convinced Ginger it was something worth considering. I told her I wasn't interested, but she gave me an ultimatum. Accept it or divorce. So, I chose divorce. Ben tried to argue, leaning on guilt and emotion, but I cut him off. Sir, with all due respect, this is a matter for your family, your 3 sons and your daughter. It's not my responsibility anymore. And frankly, I'm not interested in staying tied to a business that's been bleeding money for 3 years. I muttered under my breath. Later that day, Ginger arrived home with reinforcements. As expected, Ella and Dexter wasted no time jumping into the fray. Dexter, smug as ever, spoke first. You see, Oscar, Ella and I have a secure marriage. Her exploring friendships outside of it only strengthens our bond. Exactly, Ella chimed in. We're open and honest, no secrets. It's brought us closer together. Thanks for clearing that up, I replied, standing up. Ginger, after the divorce, you'll be free to share your life however you see fit. Dexter smirked. So you think Ginger should suppress her needs because of your insecurities? I grinned, baring all my teeth. If believing that helps you sleep at night, go ahead. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving them stunned. That night, Ginger attempted to rekindle intimacy. I met her efforts with a grin. Rest up, Ginger. You've got a busy day ahead, don't you? As usual, I woke at 5:30 and left the bed without bothering to be quiet. Downstairs, I brewed coffee and skimmed the day's news, shaking my head at the absurdity of national politics. These politicians should live by their own rules, I muttered. No lifetime perks, no private health care, just the same insurance they've mandated for everyone else. Around 11, Dexter knocked on the door. When I answered, he tried to step inside, but I blocked him with a firm hand. What do you need? I'm here to pick up Ginger for the airport, he said, attempting to push past me again. I'll let her know you're here, I replied, shutting the door in his face. Minutes later, Ginger came downstairs, suitcase in hand. "Why didn't you tell me Dexter and Ella were waiting outside?" she snapped. "Oh, right," I said dryly. "Dexter and Ella are here." I returned my attention to the sitcom I'd been watching. "Must you act so immaturely?" Ginger demanded, leaning toward me, her frustration evident. I sidestepped smoothly, leaving Ginger leaning in to kiss nothing but empty air. "We'll discuss this when I get back," she declared firmly. "No, we won't," I replied flatly, turning my focus back to my day. After finishing my sitcom and enjoying a hearty meal, I moved on to painting the front door a soft, pale yellow. The color perfectly complemented the red brick exterior of the house, making the place feel fresh and inviting. Samson, our tabby cat, meowed insistently from the garage. I chuckled, wiping my hands. "Hang tight, buddy. Once this paint dries, I'll let you out." Later, upstairs, I got to work on a few financial housekeeping tasks. The shared credit cards were the first to go. I canceled them without hesitation. I wasn't sure if Ginger had separate accounts, but I had no intention of funding her whims or her cousin Ella's extravagant lifestyle. Next, I accessed Ginger's personal bank account and withdrew half the funds. From our joint account, to which I was the sole contributor, I did the same. Using the bank's website, I opened a new account under my name and deposited the money there. I took it further, removing my name from the utilities and cable TV accounts. An email from Preston Vale Power and Light informed me the cancellation would only take effect at the end of the billing cycle. "Doesn't matter," I muttered to the screen, already mentally done with it all. By evening, hunger struck again, and I treated myself to Sloan's Pizza, a forbidden indulgence during my marriage. "Maybe this'll kill me with a heart attack," I joked to myself, placing the order. At the pizzeria, I paired my meal with a draft beer, savoring every bite. Even the waitress, who was significantly overweight, caught my eye. I flirted lightly, though my mood darkened when her long nail tapped my wedding ring. I forced a smile, left a tip, and walked out. Back in my truck, I wrestled with the ring, eventually slipping it off and tossing it into the console's cup holder. "Forever love. Huh, Ginger?" I muttered bitterly. Guess that didn't age well. The low fuel light blinked on, so I pulled into a gas station. Initially, I planned to put in just $10, but I decided to fill the tank entirely. "Filling 22 gallons sure takes its time," I muttered as the pump chugged along. Wandering into the convenience store, I grabbed a six-pack of Budweiser and spotted some strawberry ice cream in the freezer section. Perfect. I paid for my items at the counter, noticing that Shannon Peacock, the petite brunette clerk, was a pleasant replacement for Shelley, the station's former heartthrob. Shannon laughed as she stepped onto a milk crate behind the register to meet my eye level. "Hey, shorty," she teased with a grin. "Your wife out of town?" she asked playfully, noting my purchases. "My wife's gone for good," I replied casually. Her eyes darted to my now bare left hand, and she smiled. "So, where are you taking me on our first date?" "As lovely as you are, Shannon," I replied. "Why would you want to date an old guy like me?" Ginger's 40th birthday came and went on Tuesday. By Wednesday, Wendy called. "Oakman's renovation and remodeling, Oscar speaking," I answered. "Dad, yesterday was Mom's birthday," Wendy said, her tone pointed. "Yeah? So?" I responded, scratching my jawline. "Why didn't you call her?" she pressed. "I didn't want to," I replied honestly. "I just didn't, kiddo." "Why?" she pushed further. "You'll understand soon enough," I said. "Your mother thinks turning 40 means she gets to date other men." "What?" Wendy exclaimed, shocked. "You heard me. She's married. Married women don't date other men," I said flatly. "That's so old-fashioned, Dad," Wendy giggled. "Goodbye, Wendy," I said, ending the call before frustration bubbled over. 10 minutes later, Ginger's name lit up my phone. I sighed and answered, "Oakman's renovation and remodeling." "Hi, Oscar," she greeted tersely. "So, how's life at 40? I asked lightly, though I didn't care for the answer. "This isn't a joke, Oscar," Ginger snapped. "Agreed," I said, "and you're welcome for canceling the credit cards." Why didn't you call on my birthday? She demanded. I didn't want to, I replied bluntly. Maybe whoever you're with now wished you a happy birthday. Grow up, Oscar, Ginger retorted. Really, Ginger? Adults honor their commitments and respect their vows. I shot back. Who's Isabella? She asked suddenly, her tone sharp. Isabella? She married Elton Webster, the bank manager. She's a realtor now and found a potential buyer for the house, I explained. We're not selling the house, Oscar, Ginger yelled. You really can't be surprised, I replied. We've got to settle that second mortgage. Isabella says we might need to bring cash to close the deal. We are not selling the house, Ginger repeated, louder this time. I've already moved your furniture into storage, Unit 212 at Easy Warehouse on Independence Road. Your dad has the key, I informed her coolly. Oh my God, Oscar, I need to get home, Ginger stammered, panic creeping into her voice. Your dad couldn't pick up Samson, so I dropped him off at Spencer's, I added nonchalantly. Spencer? But Spencer has Dobermans, Ginger shrieked. Whoops, I said, chuckling. No wonder he was so eager to adopt the cat. Ignoring her frantic protests, I ended the call, leaving the phone on the counter. Upstairs, I surfed the internet while the phone rang again and again. I ignored it, muttering under my breath. Maybe your mom's new boyfriend can finance your final year of school. After shutting down the computer, I shaved, showered, and dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. With a sense of finality, I tossed my cell phone into the trash, wheeled the can to the curb, and stepped outside. Going to miss you, Oscar, Voltaire, my neighbor, said, catching me off guard. Voltaire, you won't, I replied, shaking his hand. The most we ever talked was when you griped about Wendy's friends blasting their music. You were the perfect neighbor, Voltaire said. Never borrowed anything. Never asked me to feed your cat or collect your mail during vacations. Glad to have made an impression, I replied with a wry smile. I bet the next folks will be all over me, Voltaire teased as he walked away. You brought that on yourself by being so friendly, I called after him with a smirk. Meanwhile, Ginger struggled to unlock the front door, staring at the lock in disbelief when her key wouldn't fit. Frustrated, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the gold standard real estate sign staked in the yard. Her fully charged phone refused to cooperate, so she borrowed Ella's while Dexter checked the windows for a way in. Gold standard real estate, Isabella Webster speaking, Isabella answered cheerfully. This is Ginger Hogarth, Ginger snapped, irritation heavy in her voice. My key isn't working. What's going on? Ah, the Hogarth's ex, right? Isabella chirped, her tone saccharine. Ex, Ginger spat, caught off guard. I need to sign some paperwork. Well, guess what? I have clients interested in the property, Isabella replied brightly. The house isn't for sale, Ginger barked, her patience wearing thin. Then are you planning to buy out Mr. Hogarth? Isabella asked smoothly. Because the Ellingtons are ready to make an offer. Ginger fumed, reiterating that the house was not for sale, and immediately called me. You idiot, she hissed as I answered with my usual greeting. Rivers Renovations and Remodeling. Can we drop you somewhere else? Dexter asked impatiently from the car. My cat, Ginger remembered suddenly, squeezing back into the vehicle. When she called Spencer, her frustration only grew. Did Oscar give Samson to you? She demanded. With my Dobermans around? That cat wouldn't last an hour, Spencer snapped. No, Dad has him. But heads up, Dad's physical therapist is allergic to cats, so you might want to pick him up sooner rather than later. Ella, unimpressed with Ginger's endless dialing, groaned. How many more calls are you making? Don't you have unlimited minutes? Ginger countered. Nope. Mr. Football here burned through most of them. Ella shot back, glaring at Dexter. Ginger ignored her cousin's griping and made a final call to her father, Ben, who reluctantly agreed to let her come over. Dexter drove them to Ben's house, and as Ginger walked inside, Ella and Dexter exchanged snide comments. How'd it go? Dexter asked sarcastically as Ella climbed back into the car. A disaster, Ella muttered with a sigh. Can't imagine why anyone would want her around. Not with you here? Dexter teased, earning an exasperated look from his wife. Any money from her yet? Ella pressed. Almost, Dexter replied, smirking. But Oscar's making this harder than it needs to be. He canceled her credit cards? Ella guessed. Yup, though she still has her debit. ATMs are everywhere, Dexter reasoned as he pulled into a gas station. Inside the store, Dexter glanced at the beer cooler, prompting Ella to honk the car horn. Dexter shot her a scowl through the window but went to the counter without buying beer. Returning to the car, he grumbled about the cashier. What is it with small women and… Dexter paused, gesturing vaguely. You know, they look bigger because they're petite, Ella corrected impatiently. Can we just get gas and go? Meanwhile, Ginger endured a brutal tirade from her father. Since his stroke, Ben's sharp tongue had become even crueler. When was the last time you looked in the mirror? Ben sneered. You look like a fat pig with a face hacked at by an ice pick. Dad, Ginger cried, her voice breaking. So what if you're turning 40? Women turn 40 every day, Ben growled. But not all of them betray their families at 40. He gestured toward a stack of legal documents on the coffee table. Just then, Samson padded into the room, tail swishing lazily. You'll need a lawyer, Ben grunted. And I need to clean the cat's litter box. God knows what that animal eats, but it stinks like hell. Ben waved her toward the stairs. Your old room's still there. I hope betraying us was worth it. 40 years old and still making foolish decisions. Later that night, Ginger lay in her childhood bed, staring at the floral wallpaper she and her mother had picked out decades ago. Samson curled up beside her as she switched off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. The week of her 40th birthday had begun with such promise. The flight to Vegas had been smooth, and Ginger had marveled at the city lights twinkling below. After checking into their hotel, she and Ella hit the roulette table before heading to dinner. But the humiliation of having her credit cards declined at the restaurant crushed the mood. The manager's stern expression as he returned her third card was etched in her mind. Only her debit card saved her from complete embarrassment, but her stomach sank when she checked her bank balance. It had been halved. Oscar, Ginger seethed, blaming him for the financial sabotage. Ella chimed in, urging her to shake it off. We're in Vegas. We can't let this ruin everything. But the evening soured further when Ella lost $300 at the blackjack table. That was my $300, Ella muttered bitterly. Later, Ginger met a charming young man at the bar. Caleb Kendall, 25, was handsome and flirtatious, but their rendezvous ended quickly, just 4 minutes to be exact. Worse, Ginger caught him trying to swipe her wallet. On her birthday, Ginger approached another man at a casino. His response cut deep. Lady, if I wanted to cozy up to a 300-pound woman, I'd stay home with my wife. He smirked before suggesting she check out a blind convention. Hurt and humiliated, Ginger retreated to the hotel lobby, nursing a coffee for hours. That night, she lay in bed wearing lingerie she'd brought to surprise someone. Anyone, but stared at the ceiling instead. Neither Oscar nor Wendy had called. Wendy had sent a brief text, but Oscar's silence stung deeply. By Saturday, Ginger was tempted to cut ties with Ella, whose constant complaints had worn thin. But with Ella holding the airline tickets, she kept her thoughts to herself. Now back in her childhood bedroom, Ginger sighed heavily. Her birthday month, which should have been a celebration, had been a series of humiliations. She glanced at the stack of papers on the desk. Grant Mollygon, an attorney recommended by Julian Humans from the Preston Vale Public Library, had been reviewing them. As the weight of everything settled over her, Ginger realized her new chapter was off to a miserable start. Grant Mollygon was direct, laying out the situation with no sugarcoating. Your husband gets half and you get half. The house must be sold, and the profits split evenly. Any shared expenses will also be divided. Despite being unemployed, he isn't requesting child support. But I don't want a divorce, Ginger protested, her voice tinged with desperation. I don't want to lose my home or my husband. I don't want to miss Hogarth. Unfortunately, what you want doesn't change the legal facts, Grant replied calmly. When one party wants a divorce, the law tends to move things in that direction. Can we at least request a consultation? Ginger asked, grasping at straws. Certainly, but it might not change the outcome, Grant confirmed. Ginger forced a small smile. I'll call Louise's office, she said, as if the act of scheduling a consultation could somehow fix everything. As Grant continued to speak, Ginger's attention drifted, her eyes scanning the titles on his bookshelves. She only half heard the conversation, punctuated by his occasional ahas and hms. Finally, Grant set his phone down and looked her square in the eye. Mrs. Hogarth, here's the issue, he began, his tone professional yet firm. Ginger gripped her purse tightly. I'm paying you to avoid issues, not create them, she snapped. Grant leaned back slightly, unbothered by her sharpness. Miss Stevenson doesn't know where your husband is. He paid her fee in full and left without sharing any forwarding address, only an email. And no, she won't disclose it. Attorney-client privilege protects that information. Oh, Ginger murmured, her confidence deflating as she sank back into her chair. Additionally, Grant continued, your husband informed Miss Stevenson that your daughter will be responsible for her own tuition and dormitory expenses moving forward. He mentioned something about starting new traditions. What does that even mean? Ginger asked, baffled. I don't know, Grant replied with a shrug, but I suspect Wendy might have a better idea. Ginger's 41st birthday arrived with none of the fanfare she might have hoped for. Dressing for work, she left her room without much thought, her hands resting limply in her lap when Wendy leaned in to kiss her cheek. Anything you need before I head out? Wendy asked brightly. No, Benjamin grumbled from his chair. We're fine. Ginger forced a cheerful tone as she responded, everything's great. My two main guys will hold the fort, won't they? Benjamin replied with his usual grunts and barks, a mix of words and frustration that had become his norm since his stroke. Ginger drove to work, following the same route she'd taken for years from her father's house to the library. When her phone buzzed, she waited until she parked to check it. The screen lit up with a simple message, Happy birthday. Thanks, Wendy, Ginger replied flatly. Her thoughts spiraled sarcastically. Thrilled for my birthday, just brimming with joy. But she still acknowledged her daughter's gesture. Despite shedding 25 pounds since turning 40, Ginger felt as invisible as ever. Oscar had left, taking with him the warmth she once relied on. After he was gone, the truth about Ella and Dexter's so-called open marriage emerged. It wasn't about freedom or excitement but financial entanglement and a shared misery. They were just roommates in a dilapidated trailer, bound by debts rather than affection. Ginger missed the way Oscar used to kiss her after she cooked him a meal. She missed the quiet moments that used to define their relationship. But when she'd announced her solo trip to Vegas for her 40th birthday, whatever tenderness remained between them vanished. Their last interaction ended with him dodging her kiss entirely. The day trudged on. About an hour after Wendy's text, Ginger's boss sent a message questioning her tardiness. Feeling dazed, Ginger stepped out of her car and walked toward the rear entrance of the library. Meanwhile, Wendy's phone buzzed again with a follow-up message from her mom. Thanks for the birthday wishes, it read, accompanied by a photo of a newborn. Annette Barbara Hogarth, 6 pounds 4 ounces, 17 inches. Wendy stared at the image, her lips curling into a bemused smile. Her mom and her baby sister now shared a birthday. The irony wasn't lost on her. She doubted her mom would find the humor in it, or whether her dad even remembered. Elsewhere, Oscar's day moved at a different pace. We offer carpets, tiles, hardwoods, and laminate flooring, he said into the phone, his voice confident as he assisted a couple choosing hardwood samples. He nodded to Bobby to take over before picking up the blinking line. Listening, Shorty? Oscar greeted, recognizing the playful tone on the other end. Guess what, Mr. Shorty? Shannon's voice teased. Should I be nervous? Oscar replied, his smile audible through the phone. Looks like you and your 7 inches are making me a mom again, Shannon announced, giggling. Oscar blinked in surprise. Again? Really? Our daughter's still in diapers. And now we're expecting another. Shannon chuckled. Blame all that talk about my figure. This is your doing, she teased, maneuvering her daughter's stroller out of Alliance Square Medical Center and into the Texas heat. Oscar laughed, warmth filling his voice. Where are you now? Just left Dr. Pritz's office, Shannon replied. Meet me at the Stone Grill. We're celebrating tonight, Oscar said, excitement bubbling up. Shannon brushed her dark hair back, squinting against the sun. At 4 feet 8 inches, she was always aware of her small stature. But in that moment, she felt larger than life. Smiling, she headed off, her heart light despite the heat.